Never anticipated my former spouse's wedding to serve as ultimate validation. Her new husband's haughty sneer at my downfall and his demand that I sever ties with her left me closing my $500 million account at her bank. The expressions on their faces priceless. Yet, that was merely the start of transforming 2 decades of disrespect into the most satisfying retribution. My name is Daniel Morris. At 52, I create music for films, not the mainstream superhero blockbusters, but profound independent productions that critics adore, but have few viewers. However, 7 years ago, both my career and personal life took a turn for the unexpected. I can still recall the day Susan informed me she was departing. It was 2008, and the financial world was collapsing. Executives were bailing from Wall Street, banks were failing, and ordinary citizens were losing their homes. I was working on a score for a film about climate change. Though it's not financially rewarding for me, I find it significant. "This isn't sustainable anymore, Dan," she expressed, standing at the threshold of my studio, her arms folded protectively as if shielding against an infectious idea. "I require stability and safety. You continue to persist in this, a dream." The way she uttered dream gave it an aura of a fatal disease. "My music covers expenses," I countered, yet we were both aware that her position at Bennett Financial earned 3 times more than my income. "Just barely," she retorted. "And what about Emily's college fund? What about retirement? What about the future?" Our daughter was only 9 then, and college felt distant, but Susan always prepared 10 steps in advance. That quality made her proficient at revitalizing failing corporations, and apparently struggling marriages as well. I didn't resist when she departed. Perhaps that's what she anticipated: my realization, my surrender of juvenile aspirations, and adoption of a stable job like the other husbands in our Westchester neighborhood. Yet, that wasn't the person I'd been identified as. Following the divorce, I relocated to a compact apartment in Brooklyn and dedicated myself entirely to my work. Susan swiftly advanced at Bennett Financial, ultimately assuming the role of CFO, while I persisted with my compositions. Emily divided her time between us, however. As she matured, she appeared to prefer my compact apartment filled with a half-occupied grand piano in the living room over Susan's immaculate suburban mansion. Then arrived the score that altered everything. A modest independent film featuring a jazz musician in 1960s New Orleans. I invested all my feelings, every sense of dismay and uncertainty into it. The moment it bagged the Oscar for Best Original Score, my phone wouldn't cease ringing. Instantly, I wasn't merely Daniel Morris, aspiring composer. I was Daniel Morris, Academy Award recipient. The irony wasn't escaping me. Susan had departed due to my unpredictable career, yet my musical compositions were now earning millions. Established my own production company and gained recognition, made prudent investments. From struggling artist to success story, yet Susan remained oblivious. Invitation to her wedding with Lawrence Grayson, venture capitalist and politician in the making, presented a dilemma. He reportedly eyed me during parent-teacher conferences as if I was dirt on his Italian leather shoes. Temptation to discard the invitation was strong, but curiosity, or perhaps a twisted desire to see Susan's reaction upon realizing the changes, made me respond affirmatively. Best revenge is often spontaneous happening when one remains true to oneself. The day of Susan's wedding arrived, graced with a picturesque September sunset casting golden hues over Manhattan. I readjusted my tie inside the Uber, questioning my choice to attend. The location was an exclusive rooftop garden, only accessible through connections, akin to a restricted viewbook. Fittingly Susan-esque. As I exited the elevator, I found myself in a setting reminiscent of a high-end magazine layout. Crystal chandeliers hung beneath clear canopies, white orchids adorned every surface, and waiters moved gracefully among groups of New York's upper class, carrying champagne flutes. "Dad, you actually showed up." Emily approached me, radiant in a champagne-colored bridesmaid dress. At 19, she bore a striking resemblance to Susan, save for her eyes, though they shared the same determination. I'd never miss this. I lied effortlessly. "How's your wife?" Emily sighed, overseeing everything. "You know how she can be." I was unaware. The silent power struggle stemming from Susan's control had been the underlying tension in our marriage, a subtle undertow that eventually led us apart. In the groom, I searched, scanning the crowd. Larry seems to be around, possibly discussing his political campaign. Emily's voice held a hint of disapproval towards her future stepfather. Despite his efforts with lavish presence and connections at elite universities, she had always remained indifferent to him. Across the room, I spotted Jason, Susan's younger brother, and the only family member who maintained contact following their divorce. Unlike Susan, Jason respected my decision to pursue a career in music, even attending modest performances during my struggling years. Uncle Dan greeted me affectionately. "Wow, you look great. Prosperity agrees with you." I reciprocated his compliment, acknowledging his designer suit. Jason made his wealth through tech startups, a stark contrast to Susan's financial sphere. "Just a heads up," he whispered. "Larry seems upset about your presence. He appears threatened." I sipped my champagne. "By the musician struggling to make it." Jason chuckled. "Apparently, he has no idea about your Oscar, your company. Susan never mentioned those details to him." Jason smiled mischievously as he spoke. It seemed particularly intriguing given that he had been telling everyone about you being, but he was cut off when a tall, silver-haired man, arm wrapped around Susan's waist, arrived. She looked stunning, polished, and impeccable. Our eyes met, revealing a fleeting expression, possibly surprise or regret, before it was replaced by her polished socialite smile. "Daniel," she said coolly, "you came." Before I could utter a word, Larry stepped forward with practiced politeness. "So you're the ex-husband. Susan mentioned you. You teach music." And there it was the first salvo. "Teach music," I echoed with a puzzled smile. "Actually, I compose film scores," I clarified, though my explanation was far from the whole truth. "Fascinating," Larry said unenthusiastically. Discussing tax regulations might have been more appealing to him. Before I could respond, Emily intervened. "Your father won an Oscar for Midnight in New Orleans and recently signed a contract with Paramount for their upcoming historical drama series." Larry's composed smile flickered briefly. "An Academy Award? That's intriguing." "Life can be unpredictable," I responded casually, finding his discomfort amusing. Susan swiftly changed the topic, her grip on Larry tightening, a gesture I recognized from our marriage. It signified, "Be quiet before you make a fool of yourself." "Emily, would you escort your father to his table? The event will commence shortly." As we departed, Emily murmured, "Apologies for that. Larry's been informing everyone that you're a struggling piano instructor who couldn't thrive in the professional sphere, and Mother hasn't corrected him." Emily shrugged. "Mother is complex. It seems she needs to believe you're still struggling to give a valid reason for your absence." I found myself seated at a distance from the wedding party, not entirely exiled to Siberia, but clearly not in the inner circle. Jason appeared shortly thereafter, accompanied by some distant relatives who eyed me with curiosity. "Aren't you aware," Jason remarked, "that you're tonight's enigma? The room is puzzled as to why the ex-spouse is present, and others are trying to determine if you are the same Daniel Morris transforming the film-scoring world." I took a sip of champagne, choosing to let them speculate. As the sun set behind the Manhattan skyline, the ceremony commenced. Susan was resplendent as she made her way down the aisle, embodying the successful executive about to join an equally prosperous union. Observing her now, self-assured, well-groomed, completely convinced of her journey, it was challenging to recall the younger Susan who used to nestle against me on her worn couch, yearning for simpler dreams. At the vow exchange, a wistful sadness swelled within me for what could have been between us, two hearts once entwined, but seeking distinct lives. In this, perhaps we both emerged victorious. As the ceremony ended and guests migrated to the reception area, Emily approached me. "Are you all right, Dad?" She, my perceptive, compassionate daughter, navigating life within our fragmented family. I returned her smile. "I'm as well as can be. Your mother seems content." Emily concurred. "She usually is, though there are moments when she surreptitiously glances at your album." "We all harbor specters," I whispered tenderly. "Even those who appear to have life mastered." The wedding reception pulsated with energy as crystal glasses chimed amidst New York's elite mingling beneath the night sky. I remained on the outskirts, sipping scotch and observing the intricate dance of power within this society. This is Susan's domain now: boardrooms and charity events, influencers and politicians. Not your scene, is it? Jason emerged beside me, undoing his tie. Once, Susan's tie had been similarly loosened. I arched an eyebrow. Can people truly transform? Do they? Jason leaned casually against the balcony railing. Perhaps they merely grow adept at mimicking what others desire. Before I could reply, a disturbance near the gift table attracted our gaze. Emily seemed embroiled in a heated argument with Larry. Though their voices remained hushed, their physical expressions were clear. Emily, stiff with rage, and Larry pointing his finger aggressively between them. I sat up straighter, feeling a sense of protective duty. Pardon me. As I drew nearer, I overheard snippets of their conversation. Impolite to your mother, Larry asserted. Ignorant about my father's actions, Emily retorted. You never inquired, Larry countered, a man prioritizing artistic integrity over family obligations. Is there an issue here? I maintained a composed tone, placing a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. Larry turned, his mask as a politician momentarily slipping to reveal disdain. Private discussion, Morris. Nothing relevant to you now. My daughter is the one causing concern, I said, concealing my steel beneath calm words. She always does. Emily gripped my hand tightly. Larry believes that Emily's internship at your studio next summer isn't suitable for her potential. He thinks she should work on his campaign instead. I met Larry's gaze squarely. Emily makes her own decisions. She has always done so. Decisions with consequences, Larry retorted. Susan and I desire what's best for her future, a professional career, not following her father's footsteps. The contempt in his voice was palpable. 2 decades ago, it might have stirred doubts. Doubts about whether Susan had been correct to leave, if my obstinacy had cost me my family. But those doubts had long since dissipated with self-realization and success on my own terms. Apparently, things have turned out well for me, I murmured. However, one's success isn't solely defined by wealth or status. Some people value the bravery to pursue their dreams, regardless of the risks. Larry's complexion reddened. It's simple to romanticize. Passion. But when you don't have others depending on you. Emily interrupted. Dad covered half my tuition fees. He managed even when life was a struggle. He never missed a child support payment or any of our milestones. So you better not. Emily, I spoke softly. I understand. She gathered herself with an obvious effort. I need some fresh air, she said, moving towards the terrace. Larry watched her leave, then returned his gaze to me. You've instilled unrealistic ideas in her. The arts are for leisure, not a profession. I smiled. Tell that to my Oscar or my accountant. His countenance hardened. You got lucky. Lightning doesn't strike twice. But Emily deserves more than a gamble. What Emily deserves, I stated, is to be surrounded by individuals who recognize her abilities rather than their preconceived notions of who she should become. Leaving Larry behind, his portrayal of the failed musician ex-husband started to disintegrate. As dinner wound down, Susan joined us at the table. Her smile only reached her cheeks. Enjoying yourself? She inquired, her voice radiating the professional warmth she had cultivated over the years. Beautiful ceremony, I responded. Larry appears self-assured. He does, Susan conceded, lowering her voice to ensure we weren't being overheard. Regarding Emily's internship, it's not open for debate, I said evenly. She's a grown adult making her own decisions. Susan sighed. Music can be unpredictable, Daniel. You struck it rich, but striking it rich, I echoed. 2 decades of effort isn't a stroke of luck. You understand what I mean. For every success like yours, there are thousands of musicians who struggle their entire lives. Observed her, recognizing she hadn't conceded an error about my career. We remained awkwardly quiet until Jason intervened, entering with fresh champagne. To new beginnings, he proposed, giving me a wink. Susan departed to rejoin Larry, who had been observing our exchange warily. "You know," Jason said afterward, "she kept your piano. The grand piano from your Brooklyn apartment is now in her study." This news surprised me. That piano was my first significant buy after our separation, a representation of my dedication to my craft amidst doubts. "Quite an unusual keepsake," I responded. "People often hold on to peculiar items," Jason responded casually. "Incidentally, Larry is about to deliver a speech. It should be insightful enough." True to his words, minutes later, Larry claimed the microphone, champagne in hand. He expressed gratitude for everyone's presence, commended Susan for her intellect and attractiveness, before making an abrupt shift in his speech. "There have been doubts about our relationship," he admitted, glancing towards me. "Some thought Susan deserved a partner who wasn't unpredictable, who chose family obligations over artistic pursuits." The room grew tense. Emily, sitting at the bridal party table, fixed her gaze on her plate. Susan maintained her smile, but her grip tightened around her champagne glass. "However, tonight demonstrates that wise decisions lead to favorable results," Larry continued. "Success doesn't happen by chance. It's intentional, stemming from good judgment and traditional values." Jason murmured in disbelief. "Is he really transforming a wedding toast into a political speech?" I noticed Susan blushing, the color rising up her neck. This was a familiar sign of embarrassment from our relationship that she tried to conceal. "Some choices lead nowhere," Larry finished, "while others lead to affluence." I appreciate that Susan ended up with the appropriate partner. A round of polite clapping echoed as he rejoined Susan, planting a triumphant kiss on her cheek. "What an idiot," Jason grumbled quietly. "You good?" I responded with a nod, surprisingly unaffected. "Quite so, in fact, and fully involved." Watching Larry's compulsion to assert dominance, I felt nothing but clarity and the conviction that the ensuing phase of the evening promised to be quite intriguing. The reception transitioned into the dancing segment of the night. I chose to stay at my table, content to watch as the Manhattan elite executed the complex social dance steps they had mastered over years. Susan and Larry mingled among their guests, graciously receiving congratulations and forming connections that were second nature to them. "Aren't you going to dance, Dad?" Emily appeared next to me, her cheeks flushed from champagne. "Not my kind of scene, darling," she sighed, rolling her eyes. "Give it a try. The dance won't harm you." Yielding to her, I followed her to the dance floor, moving rhythmically to a jazz melody. Coincidentally, it was a piece I had reworked for a movie production just recently. Susan seemed to be observing us with an inscrutable look. "Larry's still in a rage over your internship," Emily murmured softly. "Let him be." Larry had informed my mother that it was absurd for me to squander my education on a trivial industry when I could be establishing connections in finance or politics instead. Despite my growing annoyance, I managed to maintain an indifferent expression. "And what did you say to him?" "That I'd prefer to create something significant rather than spend my life peddling influence." Emily flashed a mischievous grin. He didn't take kindly to that remark. As the song concluded, Larry appeared. His politically correct smile remained in place, but his eyes remained chilly. "Excuse me, may I borrow Emily for a moment? Senator Blackwood wishes to discuss summer internship opportunities in Washington." "On the contrary," Emily started. "That's Emily's decision," I interjected calmly. Larry's grin stiffened. "Some decisions call for mature wisdom. Not everyone perceives the implications. You might be amazed by what I comprehend." I responded levelly. "Perhaps you underestimate me." A hint of unease showed on his face. "To put it bluntly, Morris, you're a high school dropout who struck it rich with a catchy tune. What could you possibly grasp about constructing a genuine future?" The surrounding conversations fell silent, focusing on our dialogue. "Oh boy," Emily cautioned, picking up on the tension. Larry became more assertive under the influence of alcohol and spectators. "Maybe it's best if you distance yourself from my wife and her family. Your presence is simply awkward." I examined him with composure, now realizing Susan's appeal to this man. He embodied everything she thought she desired: status, security, credibility. Let me tell you something that makes you uncomfortable, Larry, I said, keeping my voice low but forceful. Having $500 million in his wife's account while witnessing him exemplify the reasons why that's a bad financial decision is what's truly uncomfortable. Larry's countenance stiffened. What? I believe I will close my account on Monday. I carried on with a casual tone. For months, my financial advisors have been recommending this action, but I kept it active out of regard for Susan. Evidently, that goodwill isn't reciprocated. The silence in the room was deafening. Susan approached Larry, her complexion pale. Daniel, she started. Larry hadn't meant. Oh, I believe he meant precisely what he said. I responded evenly, and I stood by my words about the account. Larry's facial expression shifted rapidly through bewilderment, disbelief, and growing terror as he partially grasped who I was and the implications of his actions. The impact of my declaration reverberated through the reception like a stone thrown into calm water. Conversations ceased, replaced by hushed murmurs and furtive glances. Larry remained frozen, his complexion as pale as when the full weight of his choices became clear. Susan was the first to break the silence. Daniel, maybe we need to talk about this off stage. I responded coolly. Larry left no room for doubt in his stance. Jason couldn't conceal his excitement. Dude, the bank president looks like someone just postponed Christmas, Larry said. Larry eventually regained composure to attempt damage control. Evidently, there has been a misunderstanding. I had no clue that you were a successful composer or a substantial investor at your wife's bank. What part did you find unclear? Several spectators struggled to hide their amusement. Emily watched the interchange with open pleasure. This isn't the right venue for this, Larry snapped, his political facade fading further. You seemed quite at ease insulting me in this setting, I noted. It's intriguing how decorum only matters when you're on the receiving end. Susan placed a calming hand on Larry's arm as he prepared to retort. Maybe it's time for us to reconnect with the other attendees, she suggested. As Emily accompanied me, she whispered softly, "That was amazing, Dad," referring to Larry's speechlessness. Not planned, I responded honestly. I don't want to continue being the antagonist in their story. The band restarted, and the wedding party tried to restore order. I headed towards the exit, my purpose here fulfilled. Jason approached me as I was leaving, implying the event was just getting started. Meanwhile, the bank's executive team seemed to be experiencing a total breakdown in the corner. I nodded, signifying I had made my point. Jason agreed with me spectacularly. He added, "You know, Susan never shared your success with anyone. I think she needed to believe you were still struggling to justify her decisions." This revelation struck a chord deeper than anticipated. It seems we all concoct narratives that help us sleep peacefully at night, making our choices appear wise rather than just human. "Look after Emily," I told him as I hugged him, "and yourself." After that, I waited for the elevator and soon heard hurried footsteps behind me. It was Susan, a bit out of breath. "Are you leaving?" she asked. "I've stayed long enough." She looked at me intensely, maybe for the first time in years. "Were you as successful when we were together as you are now?" I smiled regretfully. "No, but I was always this focused." The elevator doors opened, presenting an opportunity to escape from a discussion overdue by 2 decades. "Daniel," Susan murmured, "about the account." We found ourselves in a secluded hallway near reception, the subdued celebration sounds serving as an ironic accompaniment to our conversation. "Was that necessary?" Susan asked, her voice tense, hinting at threats against the bank based on personal insults. "Not threats," I responded calmly. "Larry had made his feelings clear, and I'm making a business decision based on that information." She sighed, absently smoothing her wedding dress. "He doesn't know you like I do." "You no longer know me, as you've constructed a narrative where I am still the struggling musician you left behind, viewing your decision as the only logical one. This is the crux of the matter, Susan." Your gaze met mine, a fleeting glance of painful realization crossing your face. "Why didn't you ever share it with him?" I inquired, referring to my accomplishments. "The Oscar, the company, any of it." You avoided eye contact. It added complexity to the story. My story, you clarified, not denying it. I constructed a life based on certain choices, Daniel, on specific values. If you achieved success in your own way, perhaps then I was mistaken about what truly matters. I concluded softly. In silence, we stood, 20 years' worth of unspoken truths suspended between us. I wasn't entirely wrong, you admitted after a moment. We desired different lives. That hasn't changed. Yes, I conceded. It hasn't. Inside the reception, Larry's raised voice could be heard, followed by the bank president's urgent tones. You closed your eyes for a moment. He'll get better, I stated. That's typically the case with politicians. She inquired, any explanation? I pondered this. The truth was, my funds were at Bennett Financial partly due to inertia and partly because of some remaining sentimental attachment to Susan. Neither reason was sufficient to stay. I made up my mind. I'll move most of it, I decided, but I'll keep enough to demonstrate no personal grudge. This isn't about retribution against you, Susan. A glimmer of relief passed over her face, succeeded by a more intricate expression, possibly acknowledgement that even now I was taking her welfare into account. By the way, she whispered, I occasionally hear your compositions in film scores. I can always tell it's yours, even before the credits roll. Your work possesses a distinct Daniel Moore style. This revelation took me aback. Are you aware of my career? She admitted with hesitation, from afar. It would have been simpler if you had failed. Refreshing honesty, a rarity after years of well-maintained tales. I concurred, flashing a tiny smile. Indeed, but when did I opt for the simple route? Susan chuckled, an authentic sound I hadn't heard in ages. Never. That was the issue, and perhaps the purpose. Emily emerged from the doorway, her countenance tentative. Everything all right? Susan regained composure, stepping aside. Your father has just departed. I nodded. Congratulations on your marriage, Susan. I mean it sincerely. As I headed for the elevator, Emily trailed behind. I'll escort you out. Back in the wedding reception, Susan retreated to Larry and damage control, to the life she had chosen. Yet something changed. A long-held stress finally dissipated. Emily accompanied me in the taxi, unusually reserved as Manhattan's lights streaked past the windows. Are you all right? I inquired, scrutinizing her face, reminiscent of her mother's, yet with an openness Susan had long exchanged for professional finesse. Yes, she replied, merely pondering. Your remark about the account had Larry's face showing, and it was worth all the awkward family dinners for the next decade I might have to endure. I chuckled. I didn't mean to stir things up. Of course not, Emily retorted with a smirk. You just casually mentioned $500 million during a wedding toast. She had a point. I apologize. A slight, unacknowledged part of me had reveled in watching Larry's carefully constructed worldview collapse before my eyes. Do you think Mom knew about your success? Emily asked out of the blue. I mean, she kept your first film award in her office drawer. I discovered it when I was searching for stamps once. She quickly closed the drawer when I questioned it. This realization sat uneasily with me. I'd thought Susan would dismiss my achievements, not secretly follow them. People are complex, I said eventually. Even parents. Emily nodded. I remember when you left. You never spoke ill of her, not even once. Despite being your ex-wife, she supports you wholeheartedly like many other divorced dads don't. We pulled up to your apartment building, but Emily remained silent. The words you spoke tonight about pursuing one's passion, despite the potential risks, resonated with her deeply. She hesitated. I had been contemplating deferring law school. Turning to face her squarely, I asked, for music production. She nodded in agreement. Your studio internship inspired me, it seems. I'm talented at this, Dad. Truly talented. But Larry mentioned. She trailed off. What does your mother think about this? I interjected softly. Emily seemed taken aback. She disclosed that she suggested you talk, claiming you would comprehend better than she would. A sense of warmth filled me. Despite everything, Susan still acknowledged the unique qualities you could provide our daughter that she couldn't. I grant you permission to choose an uncertain path. Law school can always wait, I said. But if music production ignites a fire within you, that flame is worth pursuing, even if it's risky. Especially then, I added. Safety seldom leads to satisfaction. Emily leaned towards me for a tight hug. Thanks, Dad. She stepped back, her phone glowing with a text. Mom says Larry is in crisis management mode. The bank president looks as if he might kill him. I flinched. Not my plan. Perhaps not. Emily smiled. Sometimes, fate takes unconventional routes. She kissed my cheek before exiting the taxi. I'll phone you tomorrow. This wedding celebration is about to be iconic. The taxi drove off, and I suddenly understood something profound. I no longer required Susan's approval for my accomplishments. I no longer needed Larry's admiration for my decisions. I had constructed the life I desired on my own conditions, and that was triumph enough. After 3 months, autumn gave way to winter, and Manhattan was blanketed under a pure snowfall. I was still in my studio past working hours when my phone rang, Susan's number showing up. Since our wedding, interaction had been scant, limited to polite email exchanges over account transfers. I honored my promise, transferring most funds while retaining sufficient amount to avoid seeming vindictive. You, Susan, I replied, taken aback. Everything all right? Indeed, she responded, careful in her tone. I'm calling because the bank is hosting its annual Arts Endowment Dinner next month. We want you as the keynote speaker. I was caught off guard. Did I hear correctly? You want me at a bank event? After everything, it was my idea, she confessed, the theme being unconventional paths to success. Seemed fitting. The irony wasn't lost on me. What does Larry think about this? There was a pause before she answered. Larry and I are separating. This came as a surprise. I apologize for the news. Aren't you? She inquired, a trace of the old Susan surfacing beneath her professional mask. Yes, I admitted sincerely. I never wished you misery. She sighed. The wedding incident was merely a symptom. Larry sought a wife to advance his political aspirations, not a CEO with independent thoughts. Not his loss, I simply stated. Another pause. Emily displayed her music production portfolio. Susan continued, she's gifted, like her father. She is. I concurred, anticipating the typical concerns about career longevity. Instead, Susan added, I told her I'd help her postpone law school. Susan said further, sometimes the unconventional path is the correct one. My reaction was nearly stunned. You did? Don't sound so taken aback, Daniel. I'm capable of change. Her tone was dry, but I could hear the smile in her voice. Regarding the endowment dinner, I said, I'll attend. She suggested, you haven't even asked about the fee. Consider it a gesture between old friends. Susan paused for a moment. Are we? I responded. Friends. We share a remarkable daughter and 2 decades of shared history. She echoed me. We are something. Something, she repeated. It seems that's correct. Following our phone call, I settled at my piano, locating a melody long unplayed, my initial composition following our separation. Initially somber, it morphed into something surprising, hopeful. Life itself mirrors this transformation, I mused. A text message from Emily appeared on my phone. Dad. Learned about the keynote from Mom. Full circle moment much. My thoughts wandered back to the wedding night and how unexpectedly things had unfolded since then. I didn't attend with intentions of vindication or revenge, but they found me nevertheless. Instead, I encountered something far more precious. Peace with my past, pride in my daughter, and a quiet conviction that standing by myself was the right decision all along. Some may label it revenge, the dropout becoming the keynote, the struggling musician winning the claim, the ex-husband finding contentment while the new marriage crumbled. However, I saw it differently. This wasn't revenge, it was simply life taking its course. Life unfolded in harmony, composing itself flawlessly.